had so much work to do. Do you want to start looking, or kind of start taking us into what that return looks like and how you guys as a board have been working across the district?
Sure. I think it's a very dynamic, and maybe that's an understatement. We closed on the 13th of March. Everybody went live, sort of live, I guess, through the internet and through different platforms. And I want to do a huge shout out to our teachers and administrators, and also our parents, the parents who really rose to the occasion and tried to navigate all of this with their kids and their families and their work. And it just was a yeoman's effort, I think, across Jeffco. So a shout out to everybody who was engaged in all that process. I think
ton of work.
Yeah, for everybody. And then all of our board meetings went into the Zoom mode. So we kind of went into immediate real time like we are right now. And that has been, an adjustment. I think everybody's used to being able to see each other's faces and talk with each other. And so we're navigating that pretty well, I think. And we're starting to have public meetings so that people can converse with us, which I think is wonderful. We're starting to get back into that flow again, so we can start to have people.
So when you were
us at the
having these meetings, your Board of Education meetings that normally meet, is it Tuesday nights or Wednesday nights?
It's Thursday evenings and Wednesday mornings. So so initially it was just having our meetings, but we've started to have our public comment, which of course you have to have with your budget process. But I think it has been very dynamic in terms of where we were even just, Brad, 4 weeks ago, right? When we were saying, okay, maybe we can make it back with 1 day, 2 days a week, to where we are now, looking more fluid, that we might have elementary kids coming back, more days than we might with our secondary and high schools. And I think, we're looking at what other people are doing across the country. We're looking at what other people are considering the risks, rewards, so to speak. And, CDE has come down with guidelines. If you can do this, that might work well. These are suggestions. We can't force you to be doing them. But I think Jeffco has been trying really hard to adhere to those guidance parameters. And so that's where I think we're all trying to stay in the rails, or stay in those spaces where we're safe with our kids, but trying to be as flexible as we can, because we don't know what it's going to be like in August.
And I mean, luckily we kind of have a couple months for other people to kind of see how things go. Like I know in business, like my company, we're just starting, this next week, and only some people are going back in. And it's basically like, if you feel like you need to get back and, you're not productive at home and your internet's a problem, we prefer you do telecommute. But I think all of us are still trying to figure out, like, what's it going to look like now that we're opening back up? And I imagine the school district's not much different, right? Seeing like, are we going to get a big spike or anything? Like I know even with like the protests, we talked about that, and the governor's talked a lot about it. Like what's it going to look like in a couple of weeks? I think there's been some ups and downs from what I've seen in state. So I imagine that the school district is just like the rest of us, kind of watching that and seeing how it goes.
I'd say certainly we're watching it to see how it goes. We've sort of, we're starting to establish some boundaries. One, we are recommitting to full-time education to the extent possible. We really do, as a system, believe that in-person education is the right way to do it for most children, not all, but most. That the community and the economy, frankly, depend on full-time education. So I think everybody really would like to get back to that. At the same time, we're required to comply with whatever orders and restrictions are out there imposed on us by the governor or whomever. And so we need to be prepared for that. We also have to be prepared for whether or not there are going to be outbreaks. And they can be outbreaks as small as a classroom, or a school, or an area, an articulation area, for example, or it could be the whole district again. And we had 2 months of figuring out what remote learning was looking like with very little preparation. And I think what we're going through now is trying to get to a system that it's a lot more deliberate, that it is much more focused on the quality of the education delivering, and that we're doing a better job of assessing as we go along, even if we have to move to the remote environment. And then we need to get back out of the remote environment as soon as that outbreak passes. So providing some definition of what an outbreak is. Right now, as I understand it, it's defined as 2 people, which I think is a little bit silly.
Yeah.
But we have to get beyond that. And then when the outbreak is over, whatever that means, get back to the business of educating our children. Because, you know, they have 1 shot at 3rd grade. They have 1 shot at 4th grade. We need to be taking full advantage of those opportunities with the children, regardless of what the what the mechanisms are.
You've said so much, and I want to. You were complimenting Westminster, but let me compliment Jeffco Public Schools, because you guys have created, and when I say you guys, there's generations of boards of education that collaborates just as you are doing right now, that implemented technology solutions.
I see a Jeffco student behind me.
Yeah, we got some Jeffco students, really. But the Chromebook initiative, the the technology, we have 2 of our 3 students that came home with their Chromebooks. That saved our lives right now. They would not have been able to access a minuscule amount of that classwork and coursework had they not had that. So did you guys learn a lot through this, of even some gaps? Where do you still need to, where are we missing the mark? Where is there still some work that you see?
Oh gosh, I think we've heard from many parents that sometimes their children thrive. Sometimes they acknowledge that the teachers have been truly heroic in their adapting to the technology. And to be honest, other times the parents feel like the children have learned nothing in that 2 months, and that we really have a lot of making up to do. I think that, teachers as a group of people have varying skills, and some adapted better than others. And what we need to do now moving forward is to build up those skills in anticipation of the need to separate, so that we don't have quite that variability and we don't waste the opportunity with our children.
Yeah,
that's well said.
I think I want to take a quick second, just so people are hopping on now, and I think we might have lost that whole first part, which sucks. But we have Jefferson County School Board members, Susan Miller and Brad Rupert, with us. For those of you joining us, we've kind of did cover some ground, what I guess would be pre-meeting, since it didn't capture it. But we were talking about some of like the partnerships between like tax rebates from use tax of the city. And Brad had really thanked the city of Westminster for all the different initiatives we do, from the youth sports program that we do with the junior highs and our work in homelessness, which are areas that unfortunately definitely cross over. I know that Catherine Scully, which I think both you probably know, who's a big advocate of Jefferson County Public Schools and serves on the council with me. That's like one of her heart issues is like homelessness in the schools and the kids that do the couch surfing. Well, there's so many different versions of homelessness. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think we have some good partnerships between Jefferson County and Westminster in that. But I just wanted to take a quick second for people hopping on to kind of catch everybody up to the conversation that we've had so far.
Thank you. You make a great mention of all those wonderful folks, and I see a lot of our parents here, as well as even some employees with Jeffco Public Schools. So Susan, as you and Brad were just discussing with some of those, some feedback from parents, as you have heard, just as there's all the great feedback and there's obviously some missed marks, here's some other compliments. There's not every student is just, they have their core classes, they go home, they have homework, that's it. There are some students who have some really great needs. We have individualized education plans for those types of students. I'm a parent of a student on one. My student's at Sadusky Academy. This is a fantastic school, but there were a lot of students that had those services at school, those accommodations, and then they're at home. And a lot of them were just kind of, as parents were like, whoa, my student had a hard time in the classroom, even with this kind of accommodations and help. Now we're here at home, but I couldn't be happier because my student ended her year so successful, and it's because of those paras. So how were you guys supporting and getting that feedback from your schools? I mean, a big school district, a lot of feedback. How did you know, or you know, how do you keep supporting them through stuff like this? And again, what have you learned to help that other end of the spectrum of learners?
I think Brad's, point about what have we learned, and we're still learning from our principals and from teachers and from parents who are giving feedback. And I believe we're going to continue to try to secure those feedback loops, because there are some places of best practices that we need to capture, and then some where you say, yep, we should not do that anymore. And I think those are the information that we need to be gathering so that we are able to be flex, as Brad was describing, when we're serving students remotely, and then when we're serving them back in the buildings themselves, and your IEP kiddos, and all of your severe social need kiddos, and the ones that have intensive interfaces with one-on-ones, right? Your kids that have a one-on-one relationship where every class that they go to. And I think those are certainly areas of focus that I know our special needs families are sensitive to, certainly. And I think Student Success Department is working really hard to make sure that those students' needs are addressed consistently, so that the expectations for parents can be met, as well as we need to be meeting those requirements by law as well, federal and state. So all of those things have to tie together. And I think we'll be doing more of that as we approach into the start of the new year.
That makes so much sense. Sorry, Dave. I think this will make a lot of a good crossover into this next. So with the state budget, again, those services require there's always a financial piece to it. That's not always the case with every school that they have to provide these kind of services, but with looking at some of those cuts, but also looking at what the future of schools looks like. Do you foresee the need of hiring and having to really, how do you balance all of those decisions if you're having to increase paraprofessionals, mental health professionals, more school counselors, kind of leveraging some of what the community is talking about now, what they'd rather see in the way of youth services and programs as opposed to other pieces in their schools?
I'd say the starting place is you have to measure the need, right? And so one of the things that will occur prior to the rollout of the plan next month is that we will be doing surveys of families to find out what their plans are. There will likely be families that will choose not to come back to in-person schooling, whether it's because of vulnerabilities of the student or vulnerabilities of the family. And they are just making good decisions for their circumstances. And others will be coming back and are hoping for school as they are used to, in their words, normal. Although I will say, regardless of whether they're in school or not, the normal will not be normal. And we're going to be having to adjust. What I have been telling people, because there's much anxiety out there, is take a breath and give it another month, because things are changing so rapidly right now, from the knowledge of what we're confronting, the extent of what we're confronting, and then the rules that are being imposed on us in confronting it, that we simply need to take a breath, let those things evolve. We have people working very hard at creating a system that will work when we get back to school. So for the people that are on the sidelines, take a moment, take a breath, enjoy a month of summer with the children, and then we'll have some more firm information coming up. You are right to say that the budget is a bit of a challenge. That's an understatement. I said we have to figure out what the need is going to be. So we need to evaluate how many of those families, those children who need the para support, how many will be coming back? Are we going to be able to repurpose, if you will, the paras so that they can be filling new roles that are still supportive of children? All of those things are right now in flux. They're the right questions to ask. but I guess I would say we don't yet have the answers. I would say we are not at a place of hiring new people. I brought up a summary of where the finances are in our budget discussion right now. Jeffco is anticipating a reduction of $31.5 million from state funding. We're anticipating $3 million loss of specific ownership tax. That's the tax that comes from your car licensing, for example. We're anticipating 1.7 million loss in interest and another 3 million lost because of student decrease. That's a total of $38 million reduction in our budget. You can imagine that we are not really anxious to go out there and start hiring a bunch of people when we're staring that kind of reduction in the face. Now, this year we have some CARES Act money that is essentially, hopefully, helping us break even, getting to the place where we don't have to do cuts and we don't have to do furlough days. We are hopeful that that's the place we're going to end up. But people will need to remember that those CARES Act funds are one-time funds. We are going to be facing big cuts come January when we start working on the next year's budget.
I'm curious, like with that, has there been?
The figure is ugly. Go ahead.
Has there been any kind of I hate to call them silver linings, but I don't know a better term, because I know like in the city we've had certain savings because we haven't been operating everything. So, and I imagine it's probably not enough to cover that, but is there some of that that Jeffco's seen, or has the need to be able to go all remote with all the different teachers and stuff and equipment that, like, I know as an IT professional, I had to buy a lot of extra stuff so people could work remote that they didn't have before. So has there been savings that are greater than extra costs, or is it just pretty much it's a bad situation financially for the district?
Well, it is a bad situation, but I guess I'd ask you to separate two things in your mind. One is the upcoming budget where we're expecting to be in school.
Mm-hmm.
And what occurred over the last couple of months.
Yeah. Okay.
And you're right. We did have some savings in that we didn't have to have utilities going in all those schools. We didn't run buses in all those schools. We kept the salaries going for sure, but we did avoid costs. And then there are some additional costs that we adopted. For example, we continued to do food service for families that wanted it, not just the kids, but we were also feeding families with some of those programs.
Wow.
Yes, there were some savings. There were also some additional expenditures, and we will need to actually, at the next voting meeting, which is next Wednesday morning, we will probably be voting on some adjustments to expenditures from the last budget to address those things.
Wow, there's so much in there. I suppose as you've really tried to say, there's no easy solution and nobody has a crystal ball to know. So I really appreciate really including us as parents and taxpayers and stakeholders by getting that feedback. I think that definitely needs to be really marketed to our families to make sure people are completing that, because that's got to be a huge help to you guys. I know our process of looking at our schools and kind of making our commitments to our schools, that all happened back in January and February. But as you said, there's changes. This has been a phenomenal circumstance that nobody could have foreseen coming. I know we had to make a choice too. We decided to go with a charter school for one, while keeping the other in the neighborhood school. And then we actually toured that school on Friday, March 13th. So we toured, everything was really in limbo. Nobody was at the school that day. So it was kind of strange. And we had to ask our child to accept and make a decision based upon never meeting anybody there. And
what school did you go to?
So we've opted to go to Two Roads Charter School.
Okay.
So that's why I say we'll have our 10th grader at Sebesky, we'll have at Two Roads Charter School, and then we'll have our neighborhood school here at Wayne Carl.
So and again, I would like to do a shout out. Can I do a shout out for
Two Roads? Please do.
Yeah.
Two Roads is about 2 houses away from where I live.
Oh, wow.
Oh, all right.
And I will say that I think that Two Roads does amazing work with some very challenging
Love to hear
situations.
that.
They got extraordinary staff over there. And the folks at Two Roads, I have great fondness and affection for. So shout
I
out.
love hearing that. I knew it was the right place. I was touring and we went in, and first we were hearing about the lunch program. So I think this is a really neat and creative way for a school to find places in the budget where they can work. So they use local restaurants, and they use a punch card, and they bring in Chick-fil-A one day, they bring in burritos.
Yeah.
So they make it creative and find a way to incorporate community.
I
into
think
that
that's
school.
that pushed our.
That might have been the selling point.
Yeah, it was the fast food. He's like, huh?
Oh, I might get that.
I'm like, yeah, I'm there.
I can see that, especially for the Chick-fil-A's. There's waffle fries.
Yeah, that's right.
Hey, that's a selling point.
I'm not sure our communication services people like hearing that.
It's definitely a creative way. I was in the gymnasium as they were explaining this, and I heard a voice. And part of my school, I went to Bellevue Christian, the big castle over there in Westminster, and I heard a voice. And when you're in school and you cannot address somebody who was your former teacher by just an informality such as their first name, so I said, Miss Winnan. And sure enough, that was my 8th grade teacher over at Bellevue. She then became principal, and now she's over at Two Roads. And it was a really neat experience. So I love hearing, your great accolades on that school. Again, it speaks to this is choice in the school system, and this truly helps families address a wide range of learners. And Two Roads sounds like, when my child's done at Sebeski, this will be a great place for her to transition into. That's a smaller school. They could have those accommodations that she needs, but still they have homecomings and dances, and they still offer those things that kids want, the social, but a completely niche type school for what they offer. So
I think that's what I appreciate about Jeffco schools in general. When I served, before I was on council, I served on the 1338 committee or board for Jeffco. And I got to actually speak to the board one time about like what we worked on and stuff. And one of the things I always talked about is making sure education isn't trying to take a one size object and shove it through a hole that's a different shape and size. And I think that education is very much like that. And I know that Jefferson County we have a variety of different charter schools and neighborhood schools. And my school, that neighborhood school that's in our neighborhood, is Witt Elementary. And so that's where we very first both got really involved in community, was being on the PT, it's actually a PTO over there. I don't know if it still is, but now they're a STEM school, as you well know. So it's ever changing in education, I think, but it's nice to see all these different accommodations for the different types of learners that will make them successful. So I appreciate that about Jefferson County schools, and that you guys have kept up that good work.
Absolutely. We've definitely kept you guys online. I know our viewers didn't see this in its entirety, but I promise we'll get it uploaded to everybody's channels in the full video, because there's some great information. But to be respectful of your time, I want to make sure if there's any other topics that we didn't get a chance to discuss. I know there's a lot to be said for safety and security right now. Jeffco has a lot, to have our own security department, but as we've covered many times in this conversation, you're working with a lot of different cities, municipalities, and that relationship may look different. So if there's any of those areas that you can touch on, that helps kind of parents understand even where to direct their concerns to, maybe that would be a great place to help parents really identify some of those.
Do you have anything, Susan? And I certainly do.
Well, I think I know Dr. Glass came out earlier this week and affirmed just the commitment to the safety of our schools and safety for our students and the ongoing relationships that we have. And I know when my kiddos were at Wheat Ridge High School, Officer Malloy is from Wheat Ridge and was kind of a bench point for people, or a touch point for kids, and had a very strong relationship Wheat Ridge has with the Wheat Ridge Police Department as well. I think there's a sensitivity certainly that we need to be aware of, and how those relationships interplay with schools. And I think Jeffco has, maybe just because of the history of Jefferson County and what happened so many 21 years ago, I think there's a greater sensitivity to how those interplay and how those relationships work. But
Yeah.
Brad, I know you have been involved with this at a much greater level than I have, so I would defer to your wisdom in that space with the longevity of the relationships.
Yeah, I'd very much like to address it. And I absolutely appreciate the concerns that people have right now. And I will tell you that we have school resource officers in each of our high schools and shared among the lower grade level schools. And the school resource officers are paid for generally by the municipalities where the schools are.
Right.
I can tell you that these people are sometimes rocks within these schools. They become resources for the students. We have my service club as part of a program that recognizes kids who overcome adversity. The school resource officers are an enormous source of the nominations of those kids who are struggling but find ways to succeed when there's every reason in the world to fail. And I was privileged to be at a graduation ceremony a year and a half ago, watching a student go by, and then after the ceremony was over, he came up and gave the resource officer an enormous hug on the stage. And the principal leaned over and said, "You would not believe how challenging it was for our entire staff to get that young man to walk across the stage and graduate." And he came up and gave that big hug to the school resource officer. That was a tear-jerking moment.
I'm crying now.
Why we are doing it.
Yeah.
And that resource officer was part of the success of getting that young man to go across the stage. And for some of these students, graduation is enormous. It's enormous for the family. It's enormous for their future. And these are important people. Are we perfect? No, we have so much more to learn in terms of our sensitivity and awareness. And so do police departments, no question about it. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have remarkable people doing remarkable work out there. And it's for the good of children. And so I really want to lift up and applaud those people that support our kids.
Very well said. I think you both, and Susan, I really appreciate you. 21 years ago, Jeffco schools would never be the same after that. And, God forbid, when this continues to happen, these are the people who step up. And Brad, you're absolutely right to say we are not perfect and we can still do better. But I am so proud of our country as a whole, because in all of this time, what other country could you get out there and protest and say there is something fundamentally not right? And within 2 weeks, we had policy to react to that. So regardless how you feel on the issue, know that that there's so many people out there working behind the scenes that make great policy decisions, like our Board of Education, that continue to prioritize student safety and public safety. And it's really remarkable. And I think that's why we're so happy to be, public servants. And I guess hopefully I can be one. And above all, I hope our community recognizes that the Board of Education makes some incredibly tough decisions. And if I don't know if we got this on camera before, and they do this in a volunteer position with zero salary. This is not a compensated position. Anybody who steps into this, it is solely because they care about these decisions and these kids. So I don't think we could say enough about the 5 of you who choose to run it and help our schools. And again, across our district, it's not an easy job. I can't imagine the decisions you guys have to make. I've watched my husband in some very long meetings over these past months with the city. We're living in history right now. So making those decisions through it. And I really appreciate you guys being on here. Is there anything that I can let you guys leave us with? You've got you're still an elected, so you still got some time left. I believe Brad had said it was a mere 500 days. And Susan, thank you. You just stepped on board, but any parting words for us, and Dave included, you could kind of wrap it up.
Well, real quick, just since you touched on the SRO thing, obviously that's one of the areas that I think got cut off at the beginning when Facebook wasn't participating in the meeting the way it's supposed to. The SRO program is something that's absolutely one of those things that we are partners in, and especially in Westminster, we have some great resource officers, and like Brad said, there are people that they've made relationships with the kids, and that's part of the SRO program. It's not just being that defense from the outside, it's also making those relationships inside so that we can do better policing, so that it's not just some of the things that we've seen across the country, because I don't believe our community is that community. Do we have places we can grow, much to like what Brad said? Absolutely, we all do. We're human beings. We're all going to fall short. We're all going to have bad times, but I'm with you. Like, I think we have great programs. I would like to see us improve them. I think those are areas actually where we should be looking at how are we funding them properly to make sure that we have the proper resources to keep our schools safe. I grew up in Jefferson County. I've lived in Westminster my whole life, so I remember some of those events 21 years ago. And I think that this community, more than any other, take it very serious about keeping our schools safe. And that there's been certain circumstances in recent history where we've had to lock down the schools and lean on our police officers and your security department to make sure our kiddos stay safe. So, I'd ask people to really think about those too, because I think they're important programs. And I know from the vast majority, not all, of the parents and citizens I talk to, they appreciate those programs and those partnerships.
Sure.
So with that, I'll let you guys can figure out which one you wants to go first with your final words.
Well, you mentioned a survey. There is right now up on the website for the district a survey talking about the return to school planning. And it's up until June 30th, and people can go to the website and fill it out. It would be very helpful if they do so. They've got something like 14,000 responses already. It's been up since, I think the 22nd of May. So anyway, it'd be great to get people's feedback on the return plan.
Okay.
And I'll find that link and I'll put it in the video so anybody who watches it later can.
And I just put it in chat. So if you if you need to grab it, David, it's right there for you.
Perfect.
Well done. Good job.
And I would, just to echo, we are walking in, together in these uncharted waters. I shouldn't say walking, maybe swimming upstream. And we just, and one thing that I took away from our board meeting on Wednesday was, I think, Dr. Glass and his team are trying to be as flexible as possible with families, and reaching out to your principals, reaching out when you're starting to think about what is your boundary for your family and your kids. Reach out to your principal and talk with them and see what is available, because I think each school is going to have a little bit different feel to it, and the relationships that you have with your schools and your principals and teachers are critical. And just to give each other a little bit of grace. And, I just think grace during the next 60 days would be very healthy for all of us, because we don't have the answers. And what may be a good answer for one person and family is not going to necessarily be the right answer for somebody else. And so I think we need to have a little bit of empathy, a little bit of understanding, and grace for each other's humanness, and that we'll get through this, but it's just going to be work and a bit of humor and
humor is good.
Well said.
Yeah, humor is good, and we'll all work together. And I think both Brad and I, you can reach us at the board. Our names, and Jeff at Jeffco Schools, we're right on the website. I'm on Facebook at Miller for Jeffco students, and you can always leave me messages there. And there's the phone number as well on the website. So we're, I'll talk with anybody. Call me, email me, whatever. I'll do my best to respond. So
love it. Well, thank you guys so much. I think we could probably go for hours or, go once a week and still not cover even a fraction of topics that face our schools today. So this was just a small snippet, I think, as to what's on people's hearts and really give us kind of that grounding back into, what's important. And family is important. And that's why, we choose where we live. And that's why a lot of people are brought here to Jeffco specifically for our school district. So a huge applaud to both of you. Thank you for what you
Thank
do.
you
And
both.
thanks for being here.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Appreciate
All
it.
Thank
right.
you. Have a good weekend,
care,
everybody.
everyone.
Yeah, you too.
Right.
Take
All
care.
right.
God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye.